Hello. Today we are going to make a roast beef. One of the things about making roast beef is you have to be careful with the cut that you choose. I actually use a eye round roast. This happens to be a 4-pound eye round roast. And what you'll notice when you look at the eye round, there isn't a lot of marbling. And what that means is it's a rather tough cut of beef. So why roast it, you say? Well, what we can do when we roast this by doing it at a high heat and make sure that it has cooked through to the medium rare / rare temperature, when we slice it, which we will slice this way, you see the strands of the muscle go this way. We're going to cut it crosswise. We'll end up with a more tender cut. That does not mean this is going to fall apart and be super, super delicate, but how you cook it, how long you cook it, and how you slice it all play into it. So the first thing that you want to do is get your cut of meat. Like I said, in this case, it's an eye round roast. I'm going to make a sauce at the end with a 1/2 cup of beef broth and a 1/2 cup of wine. So I'm using pinot noir today. It's pretty much whatever I happen to have on hand. So we take the beef roast out of its packaging. We've got it on a sheet pan. I'm going to move it over to the side for the time being, because the first thing that we're going to do is actually create a paste. And we're going to create a paste and add all of those ingredients on top of and around the roast itself. So we start out with about 4 or 5 pieces of garlic. So we're gonna use our garlic press to get that going. Let me move this a little bit further out so you can see what I'm doing. So you just put this through your garlic press. Saves you a lot of time. You can chop it if you'd like. Just make sure you get it as fine as possible. A paste means it needs to be kind of spreadable. So because I like garlic, I'm going to use about 5 pieces. I have a 4-pound roast, so that's going to go off really well. So get all of these put through our press. And last one. All right, so we've got all of our garlic in our bowl. Next, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of thyme. And they can be heaping. You're not going to have any problems with this. You want to season the roast. And the only seasoning is on the outside, because remember, we don't have any fat on the inside. So we're going to be generous. 2 teaspoons of salt. And then about a 1/2 teaspoon or so of pepper. It really comes down to how much pepper you like to have. So I'm gonna go ahead and probably do about 10 turns. You can always add a bit more. So we're done with our salt, pepper, and thyme. And then we're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. 1, 2. So I'm going to start there. I'm going to use my tablespoon to just mix this up. And it's a little dry, so I'm going to add another tablespoon of olive oil. There we go. That's looking better. It could probably take like another 1/2 tablespoon. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. About a 1/2 tablespoon of olive oil. So now that we have our paste ready, we're going to get our roast. And we're going to, I use the spoon itself to put some on here. We'll do about half on top, half on the bottom. And I use the back of my spoon, again, so I don't have to dirty my hand, but you could use your hands as long as your hands are washed. And this is going to sit for an hour before we even put it into our oven. Okay, so you want to get this around your entire roast. Put your roast on the counter, let it sit for about an hour. That allows it to come to room temperature. It allows these flavors to start to slowly penetrate. That's what the salt is going to do. And then we're going to get it into our oven. Okay, so it's been an hour, and what I have done is I've taken 2 pieces of foil, one going one way, one going the other way, so that ultimately I will be able to cover the roast. What I'm going to do right now is place it into a 500-degree oven, and for 6 minutes per pound, I'm going to roast the meat itself, and then we're going to lower the temperature. So depending on how many pounds your piece of meat is, remember it's 6 minutes per pound at 500 degrees. Here we go. Okay, so we've taken our roast out. I'm going to put in my thermometer. This is very hot, so you want to be careful. When you put a thermometer that goes with your oven, you want to get it to the center of the meat itself. And now we're going to cover this up. So we're going to bring the foil up and over. And fold that down. I'm going to leave my coil there to be able to come out. Bring the sides up. And you want to do it as best you can, depending on how much foil you've put there, but hopefully you've put enough to cover the whole thing. We're going to pop this back in the oven until it reaches an internal temperature of 125 degrees. And that's going to give me a medium rare roast, because when I take it out, it's going to sit and rest, and it will continue to cook and bring it up to 130. So I'm going to pop this back in the oven. I'm going to lower the oven temperature to 425. Okay, so our roast has hit the 125 mark. I've opened it up here just so that it's not completely covered. It's still hot. But we're going to take those juices that are down there and we're going to put them in our pan so that we can make our sauce. So I'm going to move us over here so we can get our sauce going. And what we need for our sauce is, as we said before, half a cup of beef broth. And again, another half a cup of wine. So red wine is the best for this. I'm happening to have an open bottle of pinot noir, so I'm going to use that. So I'm going to put that into our pan as well. And then I'm going to take the juices that we saw from the roast and get them in here, and we're going to reduce that to 1/4 of its volume. So I'm going to get that started, and then I'll show you how we're going to finish it with 2 tablespoons of butter. So I'm going to go ahead and get that. The pan drippings. This is where, you know, the serious, delicious flavor is going to come from. We'll pour that in. You got to hold on to the roast so it doesn't tip over. There's not much left there, so I'm not going to worry about a little bit. It's not even 1/4 of a cup. All right, so we're going to turn our fan on. I'm going to turn this on to about medium, and we're going to look at the amount that's in here and reduce it by a quarter of its amount. And then I'll bring you back and we'll add our butter and our sauce will be done. Okay, so we've reduced this down. I'm gonna use my little banana holder to hold the pot because this gets hot. And we've reduced it down about a quarter of what it was. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna turn that off, and we'll turn off the fan as well. And now you can see this is really hot. So what we're gonna do is add in 1 piece of butter for a total of 2 tablespoons. And we just stir, and that butter has to be cold until the butter melts. And just before that piece of butter is completely melted, we're going to add the next piece of butter. So it's one at a time, or, ooh, look at that, I saved it. And that's going to create an emulsion, a very light emulsion with the sauce that we have here. So it's not going to be very thick. It's not going to be a gravy, but it's going to be slightly thicker. It'll coat the back of a spoon once we're done adding in all of the butter. So we'll do our next piece. Don't want it to go plop and splash everywhere. And remember, that butter is cold, and it needs to be cold in order for this to work. So the butter is slowly cooling down the sauce, but it's also creating an emulsion. So we're going to keep doing that. We've got 2 more pieces. And just as that piece is almost done, I add the next one for each iteration here. I'm going to hold and I'm stirring just to make sure that the butter comes into contact and melts evenly as we go along. 1 more piece after this. All right, last piece. And that's going to be our sauce. Once these are all melted, I'm not going to reheat this. This is hot enough. I'm just going to put it off to the side. And then we're going to slice our roast. Just want to make sure that all of the butter is melted before we stop stirring. And it's almost there. Okay, we're going to get our roast out. It's been resting now for about 15 minutes, and we're going to start slicing. Okay, so we have our roast ready to go. You'll notice I'm going to cut it this way. All right, I'm going to slightly move my cutting board just for the angle for it to be easier for me. And you want to cut this as thin as you possibly can. And it's important that you've rested the meat so it doesn't lose all of its juices. The resting allows the juices that are inside the meat to redistribute themselves and kind of settle down. If you cut it too soon, the juices are just going to run out and you're going to end up with an extremely dry piece of meat. That's true of anything that you roast. So I have hands that can handle the heat. So I use my hand to steady the roast. The one thing I would say not to use is a fork. If you need to use something else, you can use a clean dish towel. I've also used my tongs when my hands are not feeling too good. And it's just to steady the roast. It's just to keep it from moving around. And you can see I'm going to cut it as thin as I possibly can. And I'm using a knife called a slicer. And this allows me to get a very thin piece of meat. So you can see this is still rare in the center. I've got a nice medium rare because I'm all the way at the end. So the more we cut into this, the rarer it's going to become. So I would suggest that you try creating a roast from an inexpensive cut like an eye round, the way I've described it to you today. Go ahead and serve it with your pan sauce and tell me if you don't think that's delicious. Have a good day.